Hello Internet, Taliesin here, and welcome to an extra special treat. And before we get started, I want to offer you an apology because I have made a massive mistake. I've been feeding you bad information, and I don't say this very often because it doesn't happen very often, but Internet, I was wrong. Because here was I thinking it was going to be my birthday tomorrow, but it turns out that no, apparently it's my birthday today, or at least Blizzard definitely thought so, because they have delivered unto me via the newly opened Battle For Dazar'alor raid, not one, but two new in-game cinematics. And you know what this means, don't you, Internet? You've already watched all the reaction videos online, but now it's time for us to do a proper deep dive analysis and geek out properly and get to the very bottom of these cinematics, because that's what we like to do around here. So the usual warnings apply. This is not a reaction video, okay? I've already watched these cinematics multiple times, and if you're interested, my reactions were pretty much this. And if you haven't already seen them, then this is going to be a terrible way to watch them, okay? Because we're going to be stopping and starting and talking all over the top of them, so if that's going to piss you off, seriously, don't be a dick, go and watch something else. But for the rest of you, join us as we talk Rastakhan, Jaina, and the shit that went down in the Battle for Dazar'alor, okay? Go, 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 go. And we're going to start, obviously, with the very opening cinematic, the one that plays when you enter the raid. You don't even have to kill anything to see this. You can see it right now just by walking through a portal, and man, what an awesome way to start a new raid. And seriously, look, we might all be buzzing about this right now, and Blizz and Terran Gregory are sitting there on sun loungers with shades on, drinking pina coladas, just basking in all the praise that they're rightly getting for this. But they're going to live to hate this movie, because seriously, how can they possibly ever release another raid without having an awesome expensive cinematic to open it up? They've just given themselves double the amount of work to do forever. And later on, I'm going to feel really sorry for them. But right now, I don't care, because this is brilliant, obviously, and a very smart move from Blizz, because there is absolutely no one who is going to be able to watch this and not feel excited about taking part in this raid. So right, we open with this shot of the port of Zuldazar, obviously the opening area of the raid for Alliance players, and where Horde players have spent the last 3 months just hanging out, doing their mission tables and waiting for queues to pop, but we have never seen it look like this. The water jam-packed with mobilized warships, creating this impregnable barrier in front of the Zandalari capital, and you can see it's very important for the director to establish just how dangerous and unwelcoming this place is. Don't forget, the last time the Alliance fleet got this close at the end of the Horde intro cinematic, they were totally torn apart by the Zandalari ballistas. At this time, of course, it's going to be a little bit different, even if the trolls and the Horde don't know it yet. But we are given a clue in the opening music cue here. This is a recurring motif in the Battle For Azeroth soundtrack, which we always hear when there are important conflicts or battles in the main story happening. And what this tells us is that the war, the Battle For Azeroth, is coming to Zandalar now. We see this guy who's quickly established as the commander moseying down the dock with not a care in the world. He literally might as well be doing a jaunty walk and whistling a happy tune, and he doesn't really get that much more worried when his attention is drawn to the would-be invading fleet. And importantly, we see this from his point of view, a minuscule amount of ships looking tiny and vulnerable out on the horizon. And the Zandalari commander knows that these ships don't stand a chance against the port defenses, and his first reaction is to actually laugh.
Fish jumping right into our nets. Go! Go!
This is going to be little more than target practice for him and his troops, and the Zandalari Navy ready themselves by wheeling these huge, heavy ballistas into place, which, like I say, we've already seen easily destroy the Alliance fleet once. And as the camera draws out, we're allowed to join their targets, the protagonists of this cinematic, the Alliance, and Jaina's magical flying psychological ghost scallion, no less, conspicuous by its lack of flying or laser cannons today, but we are being very serious though, okay? And as we get our first glimpse of the final boss of this raid, Jaina, what I love about this moment is the determined focus of everyone on this ship. Jaina and Tandred, brother and sister, who have only just been reunited and reconciled after years and years, make a point of referring to each other by rank. Oh, and if you thought the first time that we saw Tandred, he had his shirt all unbuttoned and he was looking all scruffy, was because he'd just been lost at sea for months on end. No, that's just how he looks. And as Spy Master Shaw, who has become one of my favourite characters this expansion, and is such a good spy, don't forget, that he can sneak around unnoticed while wearing a huge pair of metal shoulder pads with actual light-up eagles on them. That's some skills right there. Informs Jaina that the plan leading up to this point was a success. And by this point, of course, we've all played through the pre-raid war campaign stuff. So we know that he's talking about drawing the Horde forces out of the city with the diversion in Nazmir. So now all they have to do is get past these Gamillion ships. And this is very important because this is where all of this determination comes in. The Alliance have a plan that they are about to execute, but the stakes are incredibly high because if anything goes wrong, as we've seen, they are sailing right into a vastly superior enemy right now, and they will be slaughtered. And everyone on the ship knows this, and everyone on the ship includes High Tinker Mekkatorque, which is both brilliant, obviously, also totally idiotic, because what the Alliance have done here is they've put every single one of their highest ranking individuals on this one ship, which just so happens to be in the middle, at the front, and a whole different colour to all the other ships. The Zandalari only need to hit this boat and the entire attack plan is over. But it's the plan which is important here, and beautifully, gloriously, it's a High Tinker Mekkatorque plan, and so it all boils down to a big red button. Because if your plan doesn't end with pressing a big red button, is it really even a plan at all? And I love the fast, jerky mechanical movements of both his console and the camera here, with the beeping light waiting to come in range, because it makes the whole thing seem like a really big deal, but also just a little bit precarious. Like, is this really the kind of technology we want to be betting our lives and the lives of the whole army on? And of course, Alliance players know what this plan is because they remember planting all those bombs on the Zandalari ships at the end of the opening war campaign. But for Horde players watching this cinematic, it might even be the surprise that Mekkatorque refers to it as. So with everything in place, we are now left with a kind of game of chicken as the two navies face each other over this big, open, ominous stretch of water. And I think the scene does a really good job of very quickly establishing a tension here. What will happen? Will the Alliance fleet get close enough for Mekkatorque to press that big red button first? Or will they come into range of the ballistas first? Literally, which has got the longer range? And there's a very subtle contrast in cultures here. On one side, you've got this gnomish technology, all beeping lights and buttons and waiting for an electronic signal to say when it's ready. And on the other, the much more organic approach of the trolls, their wooden ballistas and their commander who knows his job so well that he can tell when his enemy are in range just by sight. And that's exactly what he does. He doesn't need any technology to judge the distance, and he makes the call.
Now.
Because this shit goes hell for leather. As the first volley falls just short and missiles exploding around the Alliance ship, we cut back to Mekkatorque with his hand ready over the button, waiting for that light to turn green, but it just won't. And as we cut back to Jaina, we see she is desperately watching it too, because everything depends on that light turning green before they are blown out of the water. She snaps back into reality at the call of as the second barrage flies over our head as the audience, which puts us right in the middle of the action, much more than if the camera took one of the characters' point of view. One Alliance ship is hit and Jaina's flagship is rocked, and everyone on board does their best Star Trek style getting thrown to one side acting. And I love this shot here of Mekkatorque as the beeps get closer together and this little satellite dish desperately jumping around like it's in a panic. And as the light turns green and he's about to hit it, which if I was writing this cinematic is what I would have made happen, because that is quite enough excitement for me, frankly. He gets hit first by an exploding missile thing, and it gets better because the cinematic plays a really good little feint on us here, a little bait and switch, because the music swells and everyone is looking really sad at the big hole in their ship and their little gnome friend who is surely dead inside it. Jaina says Gelbin, his first name, under her breath, because they aren't just soldiers, they are friends. But it is a feint because once again, Jaina has her eyes off the road and we get another shout out. Look out! And in a split second, she has an instinctual reaction to put up her hand and use her magic to block a shitting missile that was about to hit her in the face. And this slow-mo as Jaina recoils from the force of the strike, and obviously she hasn't just saved her own life here, but also Tandred and everyone else on the ship. And the Saving Private Ryan-esque heroic death music tells us that at this exact moment, the Alliance situation is dire. The plan has failed, the enemy have got them at their mercy and are turning the screw, and they are sitting ducks. And then, the moment of hope. The gasping intake of breath and the outreached hand of Taliesin Mekkatorque. Because somehow he's still alive, and somehow his console is still in one piece, and somehow the missile didn't puncture the bottom of the ship, but who cares? We cut back to Jaina straining, fingers bent in a claw to hold her shield, which might keep her and Tandred alive, but certainly isn't going to save her ship or her army as this relentless volley of missiles rain down on them. And they don't know that Taliesin is alive. For them, the plan has failed, and it's just a case of surviving if they can, but knowing that they probably won't. And my goodness, we have talked in the past about gnomes not getting their moment to shine in previous cinematics, or even in the game in general, but what we have here, ladies and gentlemen of the internet, is Taliesin Mekkatorque being the hero of the entire alliance, being the only character in the game that can get away with the comedy "I've just been blown up by a cartoon bomb," black marks on his face, a man who's lost his cool goggles but doesn't care. And what I really love about Taliesin all throughout this cinematic, but particularly here, is how unafraid the animators were to give him cute, sprightly, gnomish qualities in his movement. If he wasn't being so badass right now, it would be funny. It's still a bit funny. So as Jaina strains hopelessly to maintain her shield, unable to even look at the destruction raining around her, Mekkatorque strains too to right his console, and just like when he set it up at the beginning of the cinematic, we get these short, sharp cuts as it clicks into life, and this satisfying moment as he punches down on the button, and now, finally, the alliance plan has kicked into gear. Because as the extreme zoom of the camera suggests both the signal being beamed out to them, but also the last-ditch desperate nature of this act, it turns out you, Alliance player, did a good job of placing those bombs 3 months ago, because it turns out there's one on literally every single one of these ships, and they blow up one by one in sequence, working their way back to the port, like the floor lighting up as Michael Jackson moonwalks his way along it, until we get right back to the dock itself, and that commander who was so confident, who gets blown into the water, sunk, just like the ships he was charged to protect. And this mighty navy lays decimated in the bay. There's nothing left but waste and debris for the Alliance ships to just casually sail through like it was trash. I especially love the callback here to the Jaina Warbringer animation, the first we saw of Jaina in this expansion. When we saw her there, her boat was sailing through the dead and the wreckage of her own city and of her own people. Now though, she cuts through the broken enemy fleet as she bears down on someone else's city. It's a really cool contrast because now the tables have well and truly turned. The last time we saw our Alliance buddies, they were desperately scrambling to stay alive, but now they're standing on the bridge for the mother-shitting album shot. Shaw and Tandred looking moody like nothing ever happened, because it never happened, right? Mekkatorque has had time to wash and find his awesome goggles, and again, just like in the Warbringer, Jaina flicks up her hood, which obviously means business, and the raid has begun. I'm gonna say it, I don't care who you are pumped for this raid right now after seeing that. And I'm not sure that we have ever had a proper in-game cinematic as we entered a raid before, because it's an unusual and possibly genius move, frankly. It sets the scene so well. But yeah, now I'm gonna need one for every raid, or that's gonna be a massive disappointment, sorry Blizz. I love that closing image of Jaina pulling up her hood. There's a 1987 Sylvester Stallone movie called Over the Top, which I saw on TV once when I was a kid. And he's a truck-driving arm wrestler, and when he's losing an arm wrestling match, what he does is he turns his cap round, and that's when you know that shit is seriously about to go down. It's like the switch that turns Stallone from a pretty good arm wrestler to the awesomest arm wrestler, and that's totally what that hood moment made me think of. But anyway, I'd love to talk about this cinematic and Over the Top all day, but I can't because there's more, and we have to move on to the Rastakhan cinematic.
Yes, my queen.
Because yes, when Horde players kill Rastakhan, there is yet another in-game cinematic. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, but Taliesin, no one is a Horde player when they kill Rastakhan, because even Horde players have been changed to Alliance at that point, to which I say, don't be a smart-ass, you know what I mean? This is a Horde-only cinematic, dealing as it does with a very Horde-specific storyline, and if the opening was a genuine fist-pumping thrill ride, then this one is a lot more contained and character-led. We still start with some badass faction battling action though. This establishing shot of Nathanos, and I'm pretty sure this is Rakira, who you quest with in Vol'dun. She's been promoted to general now, after all. And you can see when we join them, the fight is pretty much over here. Rakira is just dispatching some poor no-name prone Alliance soldier. They're kind of just mopping up, and they must think that the danger is pretty much over, until the calm is pierced by a blood-curdling scream.
Princess Talanji!
Kind of scream that can only mean genuine tragedy. And I love how the camera spins around with the two characters here with a very lurching zoom like in a horror movie, which is kind of fitting. And as they look up and see the big bad up on high, looking down at them with disdain, and you know, I keep forgetting that Jaina is the final boss of this raid, and this is trying to set her up as that a little bit more for Horde players. There's this great Die Hard style moment when Thanos and Jaina's eyes meet. Jaina has a look that says, "It is done." And the Thanos is literally quivering with rage here. Because Jaina's gone, she doesn't give a shit. She's striding away like Putris in the Wrathgate cinematic, actually. But Thanos is one step ahead of all of the other Horde down there. He's smart. He knows this Nazmir blood moon hanging over the temple is probably a bad thing. He knows it's not Talanji that they have to worry about, as he tells them to
Get to the king now.
But it's not the approaching Horde forces that we have the point of view of as we arrive in the throne room. Instead, there's another horror movie vibe as the disembodied camera floats around a pillar to discover two characters whose faces we can't see. But of course, this is no disconnected or abstract camera view, because there's another consciousness in this room with Talanji and Rastakhan. But here we see the legendary king of the mightiest troll empire on the planet, with his outrageously thick legs, coughing and spluttering his last in this cold, empty throne room. Because in fairness, and I don't know if you've seen the Rastakhan fight in Dazar'alor, but fair play, the old boy goes out swinging, good on him. But at this stage, he's been defeated and looted by up to 30 Alliance players, or Horde players, pretending to be Alliance players. No one needs to know about that. But there's something else that Rastakhan's movements suggest here. His sudden and lurching movements don't just suggest someone who's fighting for life, but who is possessed or undergoing an exorcism. And fittingly, the camera holds off showing us the king's face for as long as it possibly can to build up the tension. And when his hand comes into shot, you can see the ring rattling around on his withered finger, which builds the dread even more. Like, seriously, what does he even look like right now? And then we see the mighty king of the Zandalari. And yeah,
My daughter. I am so sorry.
he's not looking great, is he? And Talanji thinks that that's just because he's been beaten up so bad by those badass Alliance. But of course, we know there's something else. A curse. A corruption at play here. His hair is lank, his cheeks are gaunt, his face looks skeletal, and worst of all, he's chipped a tusk. And after Vol'jin, we know that is bad news. Like, this is a one-way ticket to Deathville for any troll. It's tragic. Poor Tusk. Poor Rastakhan. But this is even more a tragedy than Talanji knows, because this isn't just the death of a king here. He knows he has dicked up in a big way. Talanji's comforting him because she thinks he's scared, but he's not. He's guilty. He says, "I'm so sorry." And she thinks it's because he failed to stop the Alliance or the Horde pretending to be the Alliance or whatever. No one needs to know. But he's not. He's sorry about all of the shit that is about to go down when he dies in just a moment. And the decisions he made and the deals he struck are all placed on her. And the king of the Zandalari trolls, a character whose name we've heard since the beginning of this game, says his last words.
Forgive.
And we see the reverse of that moment in Rastakhan's deal cinematic, when Bwonsamdi and he shake hands and Bwonsamdi becomes part of the king, and Talanji gently touches his hand, oblivious to what he's just done. Because now, as Rastakhan dies, he grabs Talanji's hand and it glows just like it did when the deal was first made, because the deal still stands. It was a deal made for her, whether she likes it or not. And that blue glow travels up her arm as the curse passes on from father to daughter down the line, just as it was promised it would be. And what's terrifying is Talanji can tell there's something wrong straight away. And this moment of realization on her face, you feel like she already knows what's going on. And the horror as the gravity of the situation dawns on her, and her father dies in the same moment. Rastakhan's face and body withers away into almost nothing. His hand drops to the side and the ring clatters away on the stone because there's nothing left of him. The curse has literally consumed him. And as the camera focuses on its new victim, and as the camera pans around, we're reminded of the first Talanji cinematic, where she is calling on the lower of kings, Razan, who appeared in the smoke behind her to carry her to safety. Well, there's a very different power at the shoulder of the royal line now, and she calls out his name to summon him.
Bwonsamdi.
Yes, my queen.
as if he needs telling twice. You can tell by his pose and his body language that the Lower of Death cannot wait to get the ball rolling on this new deal. You suspect that this, being in charge of Talanji on the throne, was always his plan from the beginning. And when he bows in mock reverence and calls her my queen, or is it my queen, he is explicitly acknowledging the bond that they now share. And if you had any doubt who is in charge here, the fact that Talanji goes out of focus, a technique that these cinematics very rarely use, should make it pretty clear.
What have you done to me?
And I really like how Talanji's grieving process is over instantly here. She knows there's a more immediate threat standing right in front of her. She doesn't say, what did you do to him? She says, what have you done to me? And this line that Bwonsamdi says next is like, you are not prepared. It will go down in the WoW annals forever as a classic line.
Oh, he didn't tell you about our bargain? Shame on him.
Shame on him. Yes, shame on him for giving away the throne and his whole line to the Lower of Death. And he was ashamed, and rightfully so. This is Bwonsamdi basically saying, oh man, you are so screwed. And his eyes flame up as they always do when he's done playing around and gets serious. And as Talanji is taking all of this in, trying to weigh up her next move,
Your Majesty, the Alliance dogs are escaping.
she's reminded of the battle going down in her own city as guards stand in the doorway, silhouetted in the light, which makes the real world outside feel like a different place to where we are right now. Distant and bright and alien, like inside this throne room is some strange dream or nightmare. And this is my favourite bit of the whole cinematic, because when they ask,
What are your orders?
what are your orders? Bwonsamdi just points. And this isn't just him saying, oh, you're needed, or whatever. This is him giving his first command. A point that says, this conversation is over. I'm telling you to solve this now. And Talanji does. In the Borealis cinematic, people shout to Lady Ashvane, what are your orders? And the next thing she does is surrender. Here, Talanji's troops ask the same thing. What are your orders? And Talanji surrenders to Bwonsamdi. There is no fight that she can possibly put up right now, which is why there's real anger and frustration in her voice when she follows his command and shouts,
After them!
Now, see, this is very much a Horde story. The events that lead up to this happening were very specifically part of the Horde leveling campaign, and there's a very good chance that many Alliance players won't have seen those or have any idea what's going on, but still, it does seem a bit of a waste to have this as a Horde-only cutscene, doesn't it? Because Alliance players know who Bwonsamdi is, even if their only contact with him has been when they've been ganked by a Horde raiding party in Nazmir and he has something sassy to say as a spirit healer. And you get a feeling that all of this death stuff is going to become important enough eventually that it would pay for everyone to have been keeping up with it. And apart from anything, it's just really cool. I feel bad for people who will never see it. I mean, yeah, and nothing much has really changed in the grand scheme of things. There was a king sitting on the throne who was beholden to Bwonsamdi. Now there's a queen. But you get the feeling that Talanji won't be as accepting of the situation as her father was. Plus there's the whole Horde get 2 cinematics, Alliance only get 1 dilemma. If it wasn't for the fact that they just trashed a city and killed a king, I'd feel really sorry for them actually. And I know what you're thinking, internet. You're thinking, hang on, surely there must be some kind of ending cinematic too, though, like, yeah? You can't just tease us with these 2 masterpieces and then leave us with nothing after the final boss fight, right? Right? Well, actually, it would seem that that is it for cinematics, at least for the actual instance raid itself. In fact, after all the excitement and spectacle of what is a really awesome raid thematically and the way it's executed, the final moments of it are actually a bit of a letdown. Just a little bit anticlimactic, which is a shame, but I also feel a bit stupid even saying that, because we've had 2 top draw, totally stonking cinematics here, and a handful of really good cutscenes to be getting on with, and I am officially a big fan of having a cinematic at the beginning of the raid. It got me totally pumped and made the raid opening feel like a real event. But what do you think? Is it a fair trade-off? Are you disappointed that there's no big dramatic finish to the Battle of Dazar'alor, or do you think that it all works out over the course of the raid? I'd be genuinely interested to hear your opinions on this, because I'm kind of undecided on how I feel about it. On the one hand, like I say, the opening got me super pumped, and it's interesting that they're not following a predictable formula with cinematics and raids. On the other hand, it's nice to have an ending cinematic, isn't it? So I just don't know. One thing I do know, though, the two cinematics that we got here were great and a really good contrast to each other. One, a flat-out action sequence, and a nice continuation of a more character-driven story. And not to forget, of course, the gnomes finally stepping up and kicking some ass. It makes me so happy. So thank you, Blizz, for creating such an interestingly formed raid. Thank you, as always, Cinematics team, for knocking it out of the park. And thank you for joining us today. If you like this video, don't thank us, thank our patrons who give their actual real-life money to make all of our videos happen. It literally amazes me every day that there are people like you who would do that. So seriously, thank you. Without you guys, there would be a whole lot less Taliesin and Evertel. If you didn't like it, downvote the shit out of it. Remember, my name is Squishy. No, my name is Taliesin from me and Evertel. Until next time, happy birthday to me, and cheerio.